Hello, welcome to Railroad Crossing Procedures Training. This is unit number 9 in the training manual. Today our objectives are to teach school bus drivers the danger of railroad crossings and the proper procedures to follow at railroad grade crossings. If we meet our objectives, the performance standard is that you, the trainees, should be able to articulate or explain the various steps involved to safely make a regular grade crossing. Our agenda for today is as follows. We'll talk about railroad crossing devices, pertinent rules, notable exceptions, then a little review. Then we'll focus on the actual steps or procedures that one must follow to cross a railroad track safely, and then review a little more. Railroad crossings represent one of the greatest hazards to school buses as far as casualties and fatalities are concerned. The train is larger and appears to be slower moving than your vehicle. Don't be fooled. Your vehicle is not moving as fast as you think. We don't want any casualties, and we don't want any fatalities. Who do you think is going to win? Chances are slim that a school bus will outrun what appears to be a slow-moving train. There are no shortcuts, so follow all the procedures. Stop each and every time at a railroad crossing, whether empty or loaded. Don't take any chances, and your school bus will not be involved in an accident at the railroad crossing. There are exceptions to the rule, as there are in most situations. The exception occurs when a uniformed police officer, a firefighter, or a flagman working for the railroad directs you to cross. In these situations, you obey them and follow their directions. Engage your senses. While you are on the road, and particularly at a railroad crossing, your senses must be engaged. Your alertness may help you to prevent a potential accident. Stop completely at the crossing and not a rolling stop. Look, check the area around you and ahead of you, and listen. Anything that you may hear may give you a warning if something is not right. Upon approaching, when you approach a railroad crossing, there are several devices to give you a heads up or a warning that you are near a railroad crossing. You may see the railroad crossing sign or flashing red lights. Other devices might include the railroad crossing gates coming down, and in some rural areas it may be a combination of devices with markings on the ground. Railroad crossing gates or barriers are there for a reason. Therefore, no person on a public school bus shall drive through, around, or under any crossing gate or barrier while the gate is opening or closing, unless directed by a uniformed police officer, firefighter, or a railroad employee. If you run into a problem, such as the gate is stuck in the down position, lights are flashing, no sound of a train, contact your supervisor so that the problem can be reported. Be prepared to detour if necessary. Remember, safety first. You are not a risk taker with so many depending upon you. Let's review a little. For what reasons are railroad crossings known as hazards for school buses? Answer: because of casualties and fatalities. Because the speed of the train is deceptive, the train is moving faster than it seems. The combination of speed and weight of the train is no match for the school bus, so don't take any chances. True or false, an empty school bus does not have to stop at a railroad crossing. That is absolutely false. Whether empty or loaded, all public school buses must stop at all railroad grade crossings. Are there exceptions as to when a school bus does not have to stop at a railroad crossing? Yes, there are exceptions. If directed by a uniformed police officer, fireman, or a railroad employee or representative of the railroad. In those situations, you obey them. What are the indicators that you are approaching a railroad crossing? First of all, the signs on the side of the road, crossing gates, flashing red lights, and of course train whistles. At a railroad crossing gate or a barrier that is either opening or closing, a driver may A. Go through a crossing arm or barrier, go around the crossing arm or barrier, go under it, all of the above, or none of the above. None of the above. The school bus must come to a complete stop and determine if the tracks are clear. Okay, now that we've discussed when you must stop, let's take a look at the actual procedures. Upon approach to a railroad grade crossing, you have pre-warning devices such as bells, ringing lights, flashing lights, train whistles blowing, or crossing gates coming down. You should slow down. Tap your brakes. That lets the other drivers know that you're preparing to stop. Shift to a lower gear to reduce your speed. Check your brakes. Plan yourself as an escape route in the event that the brakes fail. And activate the four-way yellow hazard lights about 200 feet or about 6 bus lengths from the tracks. Always remember, you must be safety-minded at all times. Come to a complete stop at a distance of at least 15 feet, but not more than 50 feet from the nearest rail. Place the transmission in neutral and hold the service brake. Turn off all your noisy equipment, such as the radios, blowers, fans, etc., and make sure that the students are seated. Maintain absolute silence. Open the service door, open the driver's window, turn off all of the noisy equipment. Look and listen for any approaching trains. If you cannot see the tracks clearly, pull closer to the tracks. Repeat the procedures that we just discussed, engaging all your senses, then proceed to cross the tracks when you are sure that it's clear to do so. If you have pulled to the railroad tracks and you find that your view is obstructed, it may be obstructed by trees, weeds, or brush, boxcars parked on the tracks, trains on multiple tracks. You need to make sure that you can see the tracks clearly before crossing the tracks. In the situation where there are multiple tracks to cross, you have to determine the gap between the tracks and determine if you must stop again. If you have a bus length in 15 feet, you will have to stop before crossing that next track or the next set of tracks. You must be able to see the tracks clearly before proceeding. It is better to err on the side of caution than taking a chance. Once you've determined that all tracks can be clearly seen and there are no trains approaching, close the service door, make sure your transmission is in gear, and build speed so that you can cross the tracks without having to shift gears. Why do you think it's important that you don't shift gears while crossing the tracks? The answer is you don't want to stall out and stop on the railroad tracks. Once you've cleared, deactivate the four-way yellow hazard flashing lights. Continue on your route. Let's keep in mind some dangers at the railroad crossings. It's important that you stay engaged at railroad crossings and keep your senses on alert. There are dangers present, and you never know what you might experience at a railroad crossing. The signals may malfunction, the train whistle or the horn doesn't sound, roadway conditions may be hazardous, and the tracks may be obstructed. Remember, you cannot afford to forget that you are responsible for other people's children. They are your cargo, and your job is to transport them safely to and from school or any other destinations. Their safety is your primary concern, so don't take any chances. If you run into a problem, call your dispatcher or supervisor. You may have to reroute your route rather than take a chance at a malfunctioning railroad crossing. Always remember, safety first. Let's do some more review here. What do you do when you approach a railroad track that you must cross? Slow down, illuminate your brake lights, shift to a lower gear if you have a manual transmission, activate the yellow hazard lights, come to a complete stop, turn off all noise-making equipment, look and listen for the train. How far must you stop at a railroad crossing from the nearest rail? Stop at a distance of at least 15 feet, but not more than 50 feet from the nearest rail. What dangers might be encountered at a railroad crossing? Signals may malfunction, the train whistle or the horn may not sound, roadway conditions may be hazardous, and the track crossing may be obstructed. Who do you report to when you experience a problem at a railroad crossing? Contact your dispatcher or supervisor to report any problems. Don't take any chances. Let's summarize and review what we've learned. Railroad crossings are serious business. Never think you can outrun a train. Stop each and every time. Engage all of your senses and protect yourself and your students. How do I apply this training? The first thing you think about is safety. Ask yourself, are any of my actions jeopardizing my students or myself? You are not going to be a risk taker. You are going to stop each and every time. Don't become lazy and develop bad habits. If you stop every time, it's automatic. If you have a problem, you don't have to be the hero. Contact your supervisor or dispatcher for advice and instructions. Be defensive in your driving. Everyone sees the yellow school bus, but someone is thinking, I don't want to be behind the school bus. So what do? They pull out in front of you. And you, like the tractor trailers and other big vehicles on the road, cannot stop on a dime. So the last thing you think about is also safety. Remember, always think safety first. We need you and your children to go out and come back home as safely as you can. How you pay attention will be a big contribution to making that happen. Again, thank you for your participation.